Alright, I figured it was worth going through kind of briefly, I guess, what I've got here. I guess there's no lights either, but for my tools, since I've moved them off the stage, finally we're getting close to showtime in the next few days, so I like to get everything right out of the way. Typical construction stuff, the miter saw, there's lumber, levels, clamps, squares, T-square, and a full-size framing square. I like my leaf blower. Not only does it run on the battery that all the tools do, but if I need to chase dust around anywhere, I'd use shop air to blow things down. Even myself, if I'm covered with sawdust, I can pop the nose of it off and just pick it up and blow the sawdust off myself, or chase it out of places that I can't dig it out with, a broom easily. All my different length framing screws were inside, so I use almost always the cadmium or the bright finish. I don't need coated deck screws or anything that's more expensive, but they're always T25 Torx. I don't mess around with any Phillips drive anymore, except for drywall screws, which is what we use to put the Luan on everything, which is our skin. And that's because I also only use drywall screws, or I only use Phillips fasteners for drywall screws for real drywall, and I own a drywalling screw gun, which runs them in way more quickly, and is well worth the investment because it, especially for anybody like me that does carpentry and special effects work, it is awesome for using with the Luan, because you use it just like you use drywall. It's just massively time consuming to run little screws in with a conventional screwdriver gun. With like a framing screwdriving gun, like an impact gun, it's just a nightmare. So little tiny screws, and the way the drywall screw gun works is it runs them in until it cams out and leaves them perfectly countersunk, and that only can happen if it's Phillips. Torx won't cam out, which is the beauty of Torx. So then I've got my fresh little modified cutoff with the little circular saw blade in it, which allows me to make adjustments to Luan. There's no reason to grab my full-size 7 1/4 or even a 6 1/2 inch circular saw to cut 1/4 inch material, even though it's nice and light for what it is. This is obviously way lighter, so this is something I can't be without on the set. Typical Sawzall, Jiggy, flush cutting saw, grinder with sandpaper flap discs in there. They tend to curve, and then they are hard to run in something like this because they rub on the guard. So I'll put them in back to back, and the curves cancel each other out, which is a fun trick. And I also may put this is a finer grit than that is, so I can run it like this if I want heavy, do a heavy job of it in the lighter. It's still a grinder with a sandpaper disc, so there's not a lot of fine sanding to be done, but that's a cool thing to have. And also I rounded the corners of those latches that we got so they weren't cutting anybody. So having some metalworking tools is always really helpful. The battery powered palm sander for doing more fine finish sanding than this will do. Sometimes I want to hog stuff right away with a sander. I may even put a sandpaper flap disc in this, and then I may want to do something finer, and I have various sandpapers with an oscillating or a dual action sander. My little pistol grip hacksaw, I would never want to be without. My circular saw obviously is bread and butter. All my tips, jiggy bits, drill bits, paddle drill bits, socket driving bits for lag screws that hold the caster wheels on, extensions, flexible and rigid, to reach in and do things like I said in a previous video, like putting that newel post on. I needed to reach through that entire 8-inch diameter cardboard tube for casting concrete and drive a screw on the other side, and I can't get there unless I can't get the gun in the tube, so I gotta have a real long extension. I had a little mallet here that's rubber, normally for running with a chisel, but it's also kind of soft, so I can tap some stuff around that may be built out of something softer and less substantial. I don't have Milwaukee's cordless router yet. You caught me. My full-size and trim router are still on a cord. You normally do a lot of linear feet with it, so I am really happy. I'm happy to one day soon own the battery one, and it'll really do me all over the place on set. But sometimes I really am processing a lot of lumber, and I don't know how long a battery will do me, but there's a really good chance that I will pass this on to somebody who could really use it and just rely on the battery one. But a following bit, so this has a bearing on it, and so I can use this to trim up all my Luan to fit, and it'll follow the framing and make the Luan edge perfectly flush with the framing all the way around, which is how I went around the edges of my stairs and everything. So that's a really important thing, and that blows through Luan super quickly. And then we're getting more into the special effects or chemical kind of glues and repairs to props or constructions like that, I've got the Quick Wood epoxy filler, which is like a wood density, kind of a lightweight, full of wood sawdust, fine sawdust. This is an epoxy putty full of steel filings. It's real powdery, but still it's heavier. It's more of a steel. So mix and set in 5 minutes, both of those. The bonding primer from Rust-Oleum that I use, it's just gets two dissimilar materials to take paint more easily. And I love these Design Master Color Tool series color sprays. They have a ton of, they're not outside quality, they're pretty flexible, so they go right onto EVA foam raw and pretty good and stick pretty well. But you have all the metallics and a huge variety of colors in a spray paint can format, and they dry super quickly. So I'll black things out and use this like liquid Duvetine or whatever, just to make anything disappear that you don't want to have to see. I just like to have really fast drying black spray paint. It's flat and it doesn't smell like enamels or lacquers. It is a different formula. It kind of smells makeup-y or powdery, like flowers or fragrant. So it's not massively unpleasant to have. Goof Off is just for cleaning anything up that needs to have paint on it, or cleaning any old glues or BS off of anything. It's super aggressive, so be careful with it. Super 77 is what we will put that like tool-backed Art Deco fabric that we're going to try and make look like wallpaper. We'll stick that down with 77, because Super 77 as spray glue is like an invisible film. It's like spray-on sticker, like the back of a sticker is tacky, but you can't see that tacky glue on there. This is how 77 lays down. It just makes things sticky and you can't see it. Unlike 90, which is like booger snot. It's a higher build, it's more aggressively sticky, so it has its place, but that's, how they differ. And then Foam Fast is a different formulation. It looks a lot like 90, kind of boogery, but it aggressively sticks foam, and that's how, like, when I went around the top of the newel post, that hanging basket, plastic hanging basket from the dollar store, and then I used this foam pipe insulation. I went around it and I scarfed the ends, but I stuck that to that plastic pot, and I scarfed the ends and glued them together all with Foam Fast. And even the thing hand, he was glued with contact cement that was brushed on, but in a pinch, Foam Fast works really good. It's not as easy to control the application of it, but the quality of the bond is just as good. It's people like to brush when they foam fabricate because they really want to sit down and control it, but if you have a failure, you can use Foam Fast. This is that PL 8 times fast grab that I was fixing the sculptures with, but I've used it around. I glued the newel post, the pot itself, to the cardboard tube. I glued with that adhesive there. Typical 5-minute epoxy, 2 parts here mixed together. This will be the translucent series of spray paints that we use on the tinfoil windows to make the art glass areas, because it's like a candy color. It's a color, but you'll get the shiny tinfoil through it from behind, and it makes really believable art glass or colored stained glass out of tinfoil sections. So there's a whole series of Tamiya translucent colors that you can get for that. This is that grass. I got this by the side of the road. I think people had it in the garage for their old dogs to pee on, because it smelled like pee when I got it. So I just put a bunch of Dawn dish soap in my power washer on a summer day and power washed it and let it dry. This was years ago, and it's great. It's clean now, and it was really expensive. I think this is at least $20 a square foot, if not more. Maybe $10 to $30 a square foot, but I got a lot of it for free, which I wasn't upset about. Plaster of Paris will maybe repair those sculptures. Now that they've been locked up and solidified with the adhesive, I wouldn't want to build up an inch of adhesive in the low areas and where pieces are missing. I'll use the Plaster of Paris. And I'll mix that in. I don't have it here, but I have a silicone bowl with a silicone stir stick, so every time it sets, I can just crinkle up the bowl and pour out the set material, so I don't have a lot of cleanup. And this isn't a sonotube as I was showing it a minute ago. This is Ram board. This is floor protection. You can get it at the hardware store. It's used to roll out on like nice floors when you're doing construction work and all the paths and routes you're going to take through a nice house, so you don't bark up the floors with anything. So it's you get like 100 feet for $50 or something like that. But it's like poster board on the roll, and we use that a lot, especially to do contours and things like that. It's not obviously load bearing, but it will close in curvy spaces, like if you had to make a piano or something like this and you needed to do this goddamn music stand. You needed to do this, you know, it'll do that for you and look great if you paint it well. So you're going to have a hard time getting Luan. Luan will do some curves, but it probably wouldn't do that one. So that's where we go to Ramboard. And that's kind of the rundown of the tool table. I think fold-away sawhorses are really nice. And my Ellis lifting shore, which is a structural repairing piece of hardware. But it works as a really long jack that expands. So if I need to pick something up, push something up, that's how I used it here. So I don't know that you would buy that to work in set building, but it was really handy to have. And that's a real quick glance at my like loadout or tools of the trade. The hat with a light on it, helmet with a light on it, the boom box. And I'm just a huge fan of everything working on the same battery system.